What's the worst job you've ever had? Hotel housekeeping. If it comes out of the human body, I've cleaned it up. I started in a by the hour motel when I was 14. Owned by a woman who didn't bother with hazardous waste procedure and cleaned up what looked like a murder scene with nothing but bleach and kitchen gloves. I walked into that room and was absolutely positive that when I pulled the shower curtain open there was going to be a body in the bathtub. Thankfully there wasn't. Just blood everywhere. Owner refused to let me report it. Made me clean it. And I didn't want to get in shitty for bleaching a murder scene at 14, so I never did call the cops. The hotel owner definitely killed someone and made you clean it up. I've had shitty jobs, but nothing compares to this guy that called into a radio contest for worst job titles, as his was chicken butthole remover. He stood on the slaughter line and made sure the carcasses were butthole free. If they weren't, he was to fix it. Tell us why you want this job. Well, I've always been passionate about not eating chicken assholes. So I figured I could do some good in the world. Cutting fancy glass for use in mosaics. A glass cutter is basically a pen with a small metal wheel on one end and a metal ball on the other. Fancy glass is thick, heavy, expensive and sharp. The weight, thickness and texture changes drastically. One may be a 3 cm smooth green glass sheet. The next may be a texture 5 cm piece of orange. There is no training. Glass dust is a thing. My fingertips were swollen with tiny shards of glass and I broke much more glass than I was worth. It was a short gig. Probably working for a moving company. Everybody dreads moving day. For me that was every day. I sprinkled mud onto potatoes that had already been washed so that they would look freshly dug when they hit the supermarket. Most depressing holiday job I've had. Edit. I woke up to gold. Thank you, kind stranger. I feel like the weeks of mind-numbing boredom were worth it now. I really wish I could provide you all with proof. But it was a few years back and we weren't allowed to take pics. Not that me by a mud sprinkling rack would have made a particularly thrilling scene. Picking mangoes in Australia. Many people are unaware that if you snap off the stalk on a mango, poisonous sap flies out, which makes you blister quite dramatically. Also the best job because of the beautiful scenery. Australia. Where even the fruit can kill you. I worked at a slaughterhouse for a little while. They killed steers there but got pork shipped in. The hams came in a gigantic cardboard vat. Probably 5 feet wide and 4 feet deep. They were heavily waxed on the inside to make them waterproof and had steel banding running around the outside, kinned off like an old keg or barrel. Once we fished out most of the hams and trimmed them, there was always a couple feet of blood at the bottom. As the new guy, it was my job to dangle over the edge with a meat hook in one hand, fishing for the remaining hams and scraps. I don't think I have any right to complain about my past jobs now. Door-to-door solar panel salesman for a corrupt home energy company. Nothing better than knocking on someone's front door right in the middle of a Patriots game. I was a furnace helper in steel factory. We made bumper mounts and hinges for trucks, hoods and other heavy steel parts. I unloaded red hot parts from the furnace with a pair of tongs. I used to catch fire 2 or 3 times a day. I hated that. Can't believe roofing isn't on here. That is absolutely the f-king worst. Pretty much like being a human egg on a griddle all day with a side order of humping shingles around and trying not to fall and break your neck. I was a cashew flicker at a candy factory. Literally. I flicked the bad cashews off a conveyor belt. Managed a local restaurant. Worked 10 to 12 hours days. Often with closing and leaving at 1 AM only to be back to open at 8 AM. 6 days a week with an 8 AM meeting on my only one full day off. Pyramid scheme selling Kirby vacuums for in-house demonstrations. Got out of that within couple weeks. Well, I'm sure that sucked. I took a job with a marketing company working at the mall trying to get people to take surveys. Literally hundreds of people walked right by, refusing to make eye contact with me. It was like being a ghost. Horrible job. Hated every second of it. I quit after 6 hours. That's crappy. It's not that nobody wanted to talk to you though. Lifeguard. It was hours upon hours of boredom intermingled with seconds of sheer terror. I actually didn't take the job. But it would have been the worst by far. I applied for a position in an industrial bakery as a sanitation technician. As advertised. The job would entail disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling equipment. But when I showed up for my interview, really an informal orientation, the nice lady told me I would actually be standing at one end of a conveyor belt and given one simple task. Pick up trays of bread coming off the conveyor belt, rotate them 90 degrees, and place them on a different conveyor belt. For the entire duration of my 12-hour overnight shift. It would have nearly doubled my pay. But I just could not do it. I put my little hat back on and went back to rolling burritos. Even in the darkest, most horrible open to close days of my time at the burrito restaurant, I would console myself with the thought of that job and how much worse things could be. The fact that their machinery isn't designed to do that without human intervention is mind-boggling. Currently in retail sales and it is soul-sucking. If I didn't know I was leaving soon, I don't think I'd even be able to get out of bed in the morning. Student teaching. Put me right out of the business. I see why so many new teachers break so quickly. Parents. Kids. Endless paperwork. Worthless administration and never any respite. 500s at a Toys R Us. Essentially what our job description entailed was to manage big ticket items out back, unload trucks of inventory and put it away, etc. Even though that is the description. We used to call it 500s because you would do all 500 other possible jobs in the store. They would have us cover for cash, work the floor, clean like a janitor, straighten up the products on the shelves, answer phone calls. The list goes on. It was such a tiring job that by the end of a longer shift you would just want to collapse. Delivering ice in West Texas, eastern New Mexico. I was making $6.25 per hour and working upwards of 70 HRS week. I was a helper and basically lumped ice bags all day in the middle of what amounts to be a barren desert. My hands were absolutely destroyed from being wet, cold, hot, dry. The ice bags had a metal tie at the end that would shred through my fingers. That job is what motivated me to go back to school. I was the fat man in a ham processing plant. My job was to take the fat that the deboners and trimmers had cut off the pig hindquarters. I took the buckets to the front of the room and emptied them into boxes, which I then weighed and sealed up. When I was needed again, the supervisor would yell "fat man" and I would do it over again. I was a little overweight at the time. Work for a major city's parking management division as a lot security guard. People would come to the lot and yell at me for towing their car only because I was the first person they would encounter when they were coming to retrieve it. It sucked, to say the least. On a lighter note, you'll learn your surface flaws and hopefully chuckle if you listen to them. Apparently my head is pretty big, and I'm okay with that. My first job as a legal secretary. I worked for a blowhard, rude, obnoxious, disgusting lawyer. Yeah, I know. Insert lawyer jokes here. It was a small town. 3-lawyer firm with a 6-person support staff. The owner of the firm would regularly lose his cool, scream at and berate the staff, and fire people in a tyrannical rage for next to nothing. I worked there about 2 years and saw no less than 20 people get fired by this guy. The support staff stuck together and was mostly a good group of people, well, except for the woman who broke into her ex's girlfriend's house and disemboweled her with a tent stake. But that's a whole nother story. I finally fell victim to this guy's rage when I couldn't find the address to deliver a package, which I was doing as a favor to his personal secretary because she was having a near breakdown trying to meet a deadline before he left on a business trip. Sued the bastard for unemployment. He fought it tooth and nail. And I won. Bartender for TGI Fridays. Literally the movie Waiting. I was a kennel tech for the Humane Society and the job details were as follows. Be in at 4 AM to hose down and disinfect the kennels of their accidents. Walk the pups daily. Feed them daily. Quarantine the sick ones with kennel cough. Wear a chainmail sleeve. Glove and neck cover for corralling feral cats. Apply a muzzle to pit bulls brought in through the sheriff to be put down. Try not to cry. When a dog or cat is hit by a car, to carry them to operation or gurney them in. Try not to cry. Hold them as they are euthanized. Try not to cry. Close bracket. Carry their still warm body to the peaceful looking bed to show their owners. Try not to cry. Close bracket. Carry their occasionally howling body to the incinerator. Cry like a bitch. Close bracket. Flip the switch. This was a no-kill shelter too. McDonald's. Really felt out of place. Competitive fast food's not fun. Did it last summer and it was dreadful. I worked with some really cool people but my boss was like a mini Hitler. Take a break 15 seconds too long. We need to chat about it for the next half hour. Mess up an order on your first day after having zero training. Looks like you need to be shouted at. Customer is being aggressive and rude to you. He would take their side and give you a bollocking afterwards. Shitty but necessary job. The job I'm at now, I serve food to old people at an assisted living home. Most of them are cranky assholes. Can't blame them though. Help desk for a mortgage company. It started out as a basic IT job where I would only fix legitimate system issues, which I enjoyed as much as one can enjoy work, but for some reason it mutated into a job where I would help people who didn't know how to do theirs do anything they asked. This included things like calculating payments, reading credit reports, and tons of basic underwriting stuff. Whenever I would push back and try saying this wasn't what our department does, the idiots would cry about it to my boss. I was supposed to be the manager but I had no real authority. It was just a meaningless title, and it would become something we do. Security in Tesco. I often wonder how security at supermarkets don't go insane from severe boredom. I was in Asda the other day twice and the same guy must have been sat there all day. I could see the sadness and boredom in his eyes. Call center dealing with billing for a UK phone company. I ended up in counseling. IT help desk for Apple. Just being in the Apple store stresses me out. Did you ever spot any PRN on someone's FKED up device? Driving around in a little truck with a freezer in the back trying to sell people steaks. Worked at a shitty pizza place making below minimum wage. Doing all the bitch work. And never once got a pay stub. Car salesman. I don't like lying to people about important things like crash safety. Worked at a pizza place with a crappy boss who never paid more than minimum despite the fact that I basically managed the place when she was gone. One day this guy the size of a buffalo walks in and makes a beeline for our restroom. This is not going to end well, I thought to myself. Fast forward to the end of the day. My co-worker comes out of the restroom with a perplexed look on his face. He wouldn't explain what happened but told me I should come look. In the toilet bowl was this singular mass the size of a football. It looked like he'd been incubating this enormous egg for 3 days and then let it go in my restaurant. I tried to flush the toilet and it just bounced around the bowl and wouldn't go down. As if to mock and defy me. Then the panic started to set in as I flushed again and again. That day I decided I need an education and now I work in IT. Edit. Worked at a call center in the 2012 election. Basically my job was to call people and try to get them to vote for Obama. During dinner time. In Kansas. I was a martial arts instructor in high school. I trained starting as very young so I had my black belt at 13. I'm a female and the disrespect men in martial arts have for women is nothing compared to the shitty other women give you. Working with the kids was great but co-workers was crap. Edit. Worked on a commercial fishing boat for a couple months. We were a 90 feet tendering vessel tendering for chum salmon, aka dog salmon. It was basically 48 hours of straight work. Maybe 3 hours of sleep and then repeat 4 weeks on end. They hired smaller guys like me to fit into tiny fish holes on gillnetted boats and toss salmon into big tubs to be craned onto our boat to go in our big fish holes. I can't begin to tell you how many times I slept in a fish hole on top of a bunch of dead fish. Sleep deprivation is pure torture. As an oblivious fresh engineering graduate that had a hard time finding a job, so jumped on the first offer I got with the yes man mentality. A small private company. Family owned and operated. That treated their new staff outside family like crap to see if they would drown or swim. They were like a cult. I can't believe I moved to a new city for these jumps. And no, they didn't pay any relocation accommodation expenses. Actually, when I got there they wanted me to sell my car and buy a truck so I could carry more work stuff at my expense. Gfo. I don't want to go into details. The one I'm now, my namesake, it's also the best. But it's putrid. Low pay. Minimal holiday. No sick pay for 2 years from starting. I've been in it for 6 months, my first job. I'm 22. For some background perspective, it's a privilege to be there and help people in what can be the worst time of their lives. But adapting to the entire spectrum of human behavior and grief is difficult. Worst of all is the lack of counseling for the stuff we have to see and deal with. I had a fully immolated motorway car crash victim. 140 mph crash, a couple of weeks back. Seeing that was fun. I've literally just finished rummaging around a half decomposed human being in a coffin for 40 minutes to find an item for the client that he wants back and wasn't even in there. Turns out he has it at home. I firmly believe I've seen and done almost everything. A little over 10 years ago, I was a customer service call center rep for Comcast. Literally have been called every name I could ever think of. And plenty that I hadn't thought of before. 99% of issues result from a few things. People not understanding that services are billed in advance and when changes are made. That first month has additional charges billed in arrears as well. Not paying your bill. Contracted installers screwing up taking shortcuts. Or co-workers screwing up and telling people incorrect information because they aren't installing new service. It really seemed like it was rolling the dice to choose one of those issues every call. Then, they would cut everybody's lunch and bring in food, the same rotation every time. Stakeout. Atlanta bread or Chick-fil-A cold wraps, due to high call volume. Thank God I got out. Worked there for a year and 3 months. I could not be fired. I could not. Ever. Quit. I could not quit this job. I hated the people. I hated the office. I hated myself. This job made me psychotic. You have to do anything your boss tells you. No questions asked. You are being used constantly. Daily. You get shitty pay. And are expected to work overtime. And do shitty that isn't even remotely has anything with your skills. Or actual position. You can't ask any questions. If you disobey, you will be sanctioned. Keep disobeying. You go to prison. I sat in an office 8 hours a day. Every single day. Had nothing to do. At all. Ever. This is breeding ground for insanity. Glad I got out of the army. McDonald's. Grilling burgers during a hot summer while the Echo didn't work and being treated like shitty. I left after 2 weeks. Making and packaging bird food in the owner's garage. They had 17 parrots. When I left for the day and turned the lights out, the birds all started whispering. I quit after a few months. What did they whisper about? Childcare for sure. I was a lead teacher for a toddler room. I got it in my head that I wanted to try teaching early childhood after being miserable working a call center job. I got my job at the daycare and I can say I regretted the choice after about a week. I was stuck in the job for about a year and a half. Teachers were overworked, underpaid, and had shitty for benefits. You were never allowed to call off sick. So even if you were sick as can be, you were still told to come in. I liked some of the kids and learning about early childhood development. But overall, small children in large groups are a nightmare. I didn't want to make my living changing TTY diapers anymore, so I quit and went back to customer service. Much happier now. Assistant manager at famous footwear. I met a mortician in the army in Desert Storm. Private from Iowa. Dude had to pick up all the bodies of the Iraqi dead, and there were thousands. That dude lost his mind. 1,000 yard stare. He was brain fried. He was 18 too, like me. I was like FCK. What a twisted experience. Picking up bodies. Not in good shape bodies. That dude wins my vote. Hope he got help.